What's up, everybody? I am Nick Whalen. I'm joined this week by my good pal, Jim Coventry. You know him from RotoWire. You know him from SiriusXM as well. Jim, appreciate you giving us some of your time, man, to help us break down week 10 already of the Circa Million contest.
Halfway through the season, here we go. We're ready to roll.
Ready to roll, man. So we're coming off a 4-1 week, Jim. I got to be honest, we got some momentum going. You know, we hit a rough patch around week 7, which was just a disaster week for everybody, but we've been scratching and clawing our way back. Very nearly had a 5-0 week if Blake Grupe just does not clank a late field goal off the upright for the New Orleans Saints. We would have been golden there. But nevertheless, we're looking forward here. And as you know, if you're watching these videos, we got to pick 5 games each week against the number. All of the Circa numbers come out around 12:30 p.m. Central Time for me here in Milwaukee. So we have our lines for the week, and they will not change. So, you know, if T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, for example, are ruled out for the Cincinnati Bengals, that one is locked at Cincinnati -6.5. No changes from here until Sunday. Jim, I'm going to pitch you on a few games that I'm considering using for my entry. I know you have a few that you like as well. And, you know, one that has been speaking to me all week is this Green Bay Packers, Pittsburgh Steelers matchup. This one is in Pittsburgh. We got the Steelers locked in as 3-point favorites this week. I told you about this on the SiriusXM show last night, Jim. I am not buying any of this quote-unquote progress that we saw from the Green Bay Packers last week against the Rams. I think they were able to take advantage of a very, very limited Rams offense without Matthew Stafford. I think that maybe gave us some false positivity when it comes to the Packers. I know, you know, a game with a low total, this one's hovering around 39. You know, there's some trends that would say you want to take a dog in these situations. I don't love the number sitting right at 3, but the Steelers defense is the side that I trust here. Steelers have allowed 20 or fewer points in 4 straight games. I think we see some regression from that Packers offense, and they look a little bit more like they did the previous 5 games prior to week 9.
You know, when I look at this, the Packers can't throw downfield. Jordan Love is completely inaccurate. The play calling now is going away from that because the coaching staff realizes you can't do that. Well, if any team is one you don't want compressing the defense to force you to stay short, it's Pittsburgh. Because Pittsburgh puts together a lot of pressure from their front 7, and that's going to put even more pressure on Jordan Love and the running game. And the Pittsburgh run defense hasn't been great, but in this matchup, when they creep people up, I just don't see them consistently moving the ball. So they're in definite trouble here. Whereas the Steelers, last week, I'll say one thing. Matt Canada, he coached from the sideline, big deal, but he did make one change that I hadn't seen. They were running the ball out of Kenny Pickett under center, and it made a massive difference. It's the first time I saw them with a sustaining running attack all year, and if they can do that in this game, that will be enough with Kenny Pickett's limitations to be able to pull the home victory.
I think we get another slow start out of Green Bay. That's really been the case in every game since with that week 1 blowout win over Chicago. Even in the games that they've won, they've had to come back in the second half. Last week against the Rams, again, they had opportunities to run away with that game, couldn't really do it until late, and the Rams were basically handing it to them. You're not going to get those opportunities against the Steelers defense. Now, on the other side, I don't think, if Green Bay gets off to a sluggish start, if they punt on 4 of their first 5 drives, it's not like you're expecting the Steelers to run away with it either. But I think that this Pittsburgh defense is not really a defense that you can dig yourself out of a hole. I mean, even if they're down 7 to 10 points early on, like that to me against Pittsburgh, I just don't know if that's going to be surmountable for the Green Bay Packers. So that's one game we're keeping an eye on. We, with a lot of the injury news still up in the air as of Thursday afternoon, probably won't lock in my entry until Friday, maybe even Saturday morning this week. We want to get some more clarity on some of these games. Jim, what is a side that you feel pretty good about for week 10?
So I love the Tampa Bay game. The Buccaneers are playing the Titans. It's a 1-point spread. Bucs are at home. I think people are vastly underrating the Bucs. Look, the Bucs aren't a great team. And I am a little nervous that their 2 corners are banged up right now. We're going to keep an eye on that because if both of them are out, this game could completely swing. But regardless, it's the Tampa Bay offense I like here. Tennessee, when they've traveled this year, they're not the same team. Their defense doesn't typically show up on the road to the same degree, don't play with the same intensity. Baker Mayfield has been kept clean all year. His offensive line might not be able to run block, but they can pass block. He's clean, and they run a lot of play action, and you've got Evans and Godwin, and there is realistically nobody on the Titans who's going to be able to deal with those receivers, so you can go to either, and I think the passing game works very well, and in terms of like Rachaad White as a receiver, basically Tennessee, they've been very good in that aspect, so I think that we'll see the wide receiver focus here, and that's where you want to go.
Tennessee can be exploited in that secondary. We know that. And, this is one that I was hoping you would bring up. I didn't feel quite strongly about it, strongly enough about it, I should say, to include it in my list here. But it's basically a pick-em game, right? And, when you got a 1-point spread, you're just kind of looking to pick the winner. And I don't know that I'm fully ready to trust Tampa Bay. What happened in the final 46 seconds last week against Houston remains fresh in my mind, but the offense is making progress. We can say that. Even the running game, the Buccaneers feel like they're just locked in as like a bottom 3 running team every season, and for the most part, it's been a disaster. But these last couple of weeks, Rachaad White's been getting going. Obviously, Mike Evans is having a much better than expected season. Chris Godwin has remained a valuable fantasy asset. So if I have to lean one way or the other here, this is one where I probably default to the home team. How much do you factor in the change from Ryan Tannehill to Will Levis here? Because we're still dealing with a very small sample. I think it's easy to look back 2 weeks ago against the Falcons and remember what Will Levis did there. I thought he still played pretty well last week against Pittsburgh, obviously going up against a much better defense. But, what kind of success do you think he has against Tampa Bay? I know you mentioned some of the injuries in that secondary. If they're down 1 or 2 starters, that worries me, because this was a secondary that gave up some massive plays last week at the end of that game to the Texans.
Yeah, and if you notice, it was the middle of the field guys, Tank Dell and Dalton Schultz shredded them. Nico Collins didn't actually go off in the game. He scored a touchdown. Interesting, Noah Brown had a big game. That I didn't see that coming. But the point being here, look, they're going to blitz a lot, and we know Todd Bowles is going to do that. Will Levis, he's had an advantage now. The first game, obviously, no tape on it. But the second game, realistically, it was a Thursday game. And there is not time to grind film on a quarterback. Your game plan is in on Monday for a Thursday game. So I thought Pittsburgh would go out with just a general shell plan for him. And what they did was they just dropped people because they knew he threw deep. That was about as far as they got. But they could not orchestrate a game plan for Will Levis. And now there's 2 games of tape. The advanced scouting got to see that last game on a Thursday. So now it's small sample size, but you notice some tendencies on Will Levis. You don't notice a lot of passes going to the intermediate area, and you kind of see where he's comfortable. Pittsburgh gave him the perimeters last week, but I think with the blitz that's come, he's going to have to diagnose a lot quickly. And I think Todd Bowles is smart enough, even if some of their corners are down, throwing a few confusing looks, because that's how you'll get to Will Levis. Now, Derrick Henry might have some success on the ground. We're a little concerned with that. But again, I think the Bucs offense is going to be able to outscore them.
All right, Jim, we got a showdown at Fred Taylor Field in Jacksonville this weekend in the noon window. San Francisco, 3-point favorites at the Jaguars, both teams coming off of a bye. I'm a Jags fan. This is tough for me to say. I really like the spot for San Francisco. I think this is the week the Niners bounce back. I think maybe we've underrated some of the injuries that they've been dealing with the last couple of weeks. Trey Greenlaw's been banged up. Obviously, Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel, Brock Purdy. I don't even know if he's been 100%, going all the way back to that Minnesota game. I think if the 49ers come back with a clean bill of health, if Deebo's in, if Trent Williams is in, both those guys have been trending in the right direction. This to me, it's a difficult spot. You're going on the road. The Jags are 13-3 in their last 16 straight up. Doug Peterson is 7-1 ATS in his last 8 as a dog. I'm not saying the Jags get blown off the field here, but I still view San Francisco as a tier up compared to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So maybe it's me, hedging my mental health here, but I like the 49ers -3.
The 49ers are in a great spot here for sure. I do think it's going to be an interesting styles make fights type of game, because 49ers right now, yes, you're right. If they get their players back, good luck with Jacksonville dealing with them. Jacksonville's been great in pass coverage this year, but when you're talking about the routes Ayuk runs, getting him on crossers, getting him underneath and into traffic, and even some of the downfield stuff, I don't know they're versatile enough to deal with him. And Deebo, of course, totally brings that underneath element. It's not a typical receiver group. And so there are advantages. So I do think the 49ers can move the ball well here. Now, the Jaguars have some potential advantages to exploit here too. 49ers are not a good run defense. They're not tackling well this year. And we know Travis Etienne is playing at a high level. What the Jaguars don't want to do is get in a lot of obvious passing situations because their offensive line is going to be in trouble because now that defensive pass rush is completely bolstered. Chase Young's there, Randy Gregory second week. They're going to have to dump off some screens to Etienne. And even though San Francisco guards tight ends well, the way they run Evan Ingram, they might be able to get him away from the linebackers. I think there's a Christian Kirk game, an Etienne game. It's going to be fun. It's going to be close, but I agree with you. The 49ers firepower is going to be a little too much.
I worry about that Jags run defense. Like you said, the pass defense has been fantastic. Guys like Darius Williams are having, much better years than I think they're getting credit for. Jags are 7th in defensive EPA overall, but it's the pass defense that's really holding that up. I mean, they're 5th against the pass. They're all the way down at 20th, Jim, in terms of rushing EPA. They're not allowing all that many yards, but they've also been leading, in almost all their games, for the majority of this 5-game winning streak. So a lot of pass-heavy scripts against them. You think back to that Steelers game, where Pittsburgh just really couldn't get anything going on the ground. I do worry about San Francisco exploiting that. And I think the general narrative on the Jags is that they've been this dominant rushing team. And I think a lot of that is due to the fantasy success of Travis Etienne. But a lot of the underlying numbers would lead you to say that Jacksonville's actually not been very efficient at all on the ground. I mean, Pro Football Reference has them at 31st in rushing EPA. And, for a team that has a bunch of touchdowns on the ground, like we said, Etienne has been so dominant on a per carry basis. He really hasn't. He's kind of had like 1 or 2 splash plays per week, but they're still a team that finds themselves in a lot of 3rd and 7s, 3rd and 8s.
Yeah, it's going to be that screen game then because the run blocking is just brutal. They picked up Ezra Cleveland at the trade deadline. I don't know how much of a factor that is, but it's an upgrade. It definitely is an upgrade. We got to give them that. Now, when you talk about the 49ers, 2 things I didn't mention, 2 areas they have huge advantages is the Jaguars do not defend receiving backs well. They're like in the bottom of the yard for like yards allowed to running back.
Is Christian McCaffrey a good receiving back?
Yeah, a little bit, just a little bit. Yeah, so I could see. Oh man, side note, betting his over on receiving yards, that would be a great. And also, they're not good against tight ends. They're bottom half of the league, a little worse than that against tight ends. And if they decide to get George Kittle dialed up here, they have some real advantages here. But again, back to the Jaguars, Etienne as a receiver, they're gonna have to use him that way more than as a runner, I think.
All right, so I like San Francisco. I like Pittsburgh. What's another game that you're targeting this week?
So as we're looking through this slate, I'm trying to see which game I have scrolled up next. Chargers and Lions. I love the Lions minus the 3 points here. Opened up at 1.5, quickly got bet up to 3. When we look at this game, look, the Chargers have beaten some weaker teams this year. And when they play the better teams, they're struggling. And they don't have a lot of answers defensively. They can be compromised significantly. Now, their defensive pass rush, they look great against the Jets. It was the Jets. They don't look great. They're not getting pressure. The Lions, they have one of the best lines in the league. They are dominant, and they're getting everybody back this week. Frank Ragnow is back. They're in great shape. They run block. They pass block. That rush is not getting to Jared Goff. And when the Chargers face an offense that's versatile, there is nothing they stop well. Running backs, receivers, tight ends, they all are successful. With Ben Johnson calling the shots, they are going to move the ball with a lot of consistency. They should easily get to the mid-20s in points, but I don't think there's any problem for the Lions offense here.
I tend to agree with you on that one, Jim. And, this one comes in at right on the key number of 3. So we're 3 for 3 on talking about games at key numbers. And you're always going to have a little bit of pause there. But at the same time, I think if you're just looking at this game straight up, you almost take the line out of it. I think this is a really good spot for Detroit. I think the Chargers defense might feel a little bit overvalued right now based on what we saw last week against the New York Jets. And I'm willing to give the Chargers somewhat of a pass for how poor the passing game was last week, because I think the Jets defense is just that good. But this is a game that's likely going to be a shootout, right? I mean, the total's up at 48.5, and you're asking a lot, I think, of that Chargers defense to continually, get stops against this Detroit offense, especially coming off of a bye. And, the game's all the way on the West Coast, long trip for the Lions, but it's the Chargers, right? This is not going to feel like a home game for LA.
No, and one more thing with the Chargers offense, this is not a good offense right now. They scored some points against Dallas, fine enough, but realistically, they lost Josh Palmer. That's a huge loss. First, it was Mike Williams. He was their best explosive threat. And then they lose Josh Palmer, who's their second most explosive threat. And the run blocking has been horrible. Austin Eckler cannot get going on the ground. Getting some done as a receiver, which is fine, but not getting it done as a runner. And so now what they have is, again, a compressed offense. They don't have verticality. Now, Jalen Guyton came back from the IR last week, played 57% of the snaps. They're hoping he could get into a downfield role because really that's how you attack Detroit. You got to unleash the downfield passing game. But I don't know that Guyton is going to be what he was a few years ago before the injuries. And so that's it. This offense is too limited. The Lions are a good defense. People are kind of just like blowing them off as not being a strong unit. No, this is a top 10 run defense. They're middling in coverage. The pressure is emerging, and you could get to the right side of that Chargers line. So I think defensively, the Lions could actually hold down the Chargers to under 20 points.
It's a Chargers offensive line that has issues. And look, if we're talking about Jalen Guyton being the guy that needs to save this receiving core, that's a problem. That's a problem, right? Quentin Johnson is still, not yet emerged as a true number 2 option that they so desperately need, other than Keenan Allen. So I like your line of thinking there. If we're using that game, we are definitely on the favored Detroit Lions, 3-point favorites on the road. Jim, can I pitch you on the Indianapolis Colts as 2-point favorites against the New England Patriots? And I would say on the road. They're technically the road team, but this is our Germany game this week. So you don't have to travel out to Foxborough. Not that that really means all that much anymore. My fear here is that New England's not going to be able to score with the Colts. Or I shouldn't say my fear. My lean on why I like the Colts is that this is a Colts team that scored at least 20 points in every game this season. No other team in the NFL has accomplished that. They're 8-1 to their team total overs through 9 games. And we know the stats with the Patriots, right? If their opponents score more than 23 points, they have almost no chance to win a game. And the Colts are turnover prone. We've seen Gardner Minshew, hand the ball over 3-4 times in multiple games this season. But as long as he does not have a disaster game, I think this is one where the Colts can ride their running game. You got Jonathan Taylor, you got Zach Moss. Minshew, when he's protected, I think is still somebody who's capable of giving you average quarterback play in any given week. And look, what we saw last week from New England, they were in a great spot against the Commanders. You're at home. You're playing a Commanders team that is a little bit down on its luck, just traded 2 of its best players at the deadline. If you can't win that game, man, and now we're sending you all the way over to Germany to play a Colts team that I think is as good, if not better, than Washington, I just have a really tough time seeing the case here for New England. Got some Mac Jones numbers to throw at you as well, Jim. 3-16 straight up, 4-15 against the spread as a dog in his career. He's 1-14 ATS in his last 15 starts as an underdog. And a good note from the Action Network: favorites in these international games since they've been a thing, 32-10-1 straight up.
Whoa. That's massive. That's huge. Wow. That's all I'll say is wow to that one. Now, when the Patriots have the ball, the offensive line has been brutal this year. This is the worst Patriots offensive line play we could see as long as I can remember. And usually Belichick always has at least league average there, and that's not been the case. The Colts defensively, they're missing their defensive tackle, Grover Stewart, 4th of 6 games out to a PED suspension. He's a big part of their run defense, but the run defense is still good enough to overcome the run blocking of the Patriots line. And over the course of the season, even though the Colts don't have any really great contributors in secondary, they are piecing it together. The scheme is working well. The pass rush over the weeks, I've seen it get a little better each week. Yeah. So, yes, Mac Jones is in trouble here. This Colts defense is emerging right now. The one advantage that New England has, Ramondre Stevenson is a receiver. The Colts don't cover receiving backs well. Hunter Henry is a tight end. They don't cover the tight end well. I don't think it's enough to score points. And you mentioned with the Colts side of the ball, New England, they're not getting it done defensively. They don't have the bodies anymore. They don't rush. They can't cover. They have injured people that, they're not getting back. And Shane Steichen, honestly, right now, he coaches his offense way better than Bill Belichick coaches his defense. And that's saying something.
These teams have very similar pressure rates on the year, and yet New England is blitzing at a much, much higher rate. They're blitzing at a top 5 rate in the NFL. The Colts are dead last in blitz percentage by a pretty good margin too. They are way at the bottom of the league, and they're still, like you said, generating more and more pressure week to week. So I'm not saying this is going to be a game where, Mac Jones is sacked like 7 times, but I don't think he's going to be able to just sit back in the pocket like he was last week. And again, he was sacked 1 time against Washington, and it didn't matter. The Patriots still could not score, and had it not been for one long run from Ramondre Stevenson on somewhat of a fluky play,
yes,
New England's not even in that game in the first place. So I like the Colts there. Real quickly, Jim, we'll talk about a couple more games and we'll get out of here. The number on Broncos-Bills, our Monday night game this week, came in at Bills -7. It was up at 7.5, close to 8 at some books earlier this week. We get it at 7 in Circa. Do I want to go back to the well here on the Bills? Can we trust a Buffalo team that's now dropped 5 in a row against the spread?
They are not playing good football right now. And the problem with the Broncos is we've got to get that 70-point game way out of our minds. They played better. Now, 2 of the games they played well were both against Kansas City, divisional opponent, very familiar with them. Chiefs weren't playing at the highest level. So it's like, what version of the Broncos defense are we getting? I don't think it's anywhere near the version when they got killed by Miami. And I don't think it's as good as the version we saw against Kansas City. And you have to think, because outside of Patrick Surtain, cornerback play Damari Mathis is sketchy at best. And you'd have to think Josh Allen can take advantage of that. You would have to think, right? And the run game, though, has not been consistent. They have not gotten great flow from that. And it's going to have to be Josh Allen putting him on the backs. And if he makes mistakes, they're in trouble. So it's a tough one to call. And the Broncos coming out of the bye, I imagine Sean Payton figured out some things that worked well, and he's going to probably enhance those. Some things that didn't work well, he's going to scrap those. And the Bills are all kinds of banged up on defense. This game might be closer than we think.
5 straight games with a pick for Josh Allen. That just seems like a lock at this point. But Bills are always better at home, Jim. They're 15-2 straight up in their last 17 at home. They're 8-1 straight up in home games since 2019. Denver's defense allowing a completion percentage of almost 74% on the year, which is like all-time high. Like, obviously it's the highest in the league this season, but it's like one of the highest ever in the entire Super Bowl era. So if there's ever an opportunity for Buffalo to get back on track and for Josh Allen to get back on track as a passer, this would be the week. But man, it is wild to think that we can't even trust the Bills with a touchdown at home against the Denver Broncos. But that is the NFL world that we live in, Jim. Last game I want to hit on real quickly, and I just want to get your take here. I'm kind of waffling back and forth on if I actually want to use this in the entry. I'm toying with the idea of Commanders plus 6.5 on the road at the Seattle Seahawks. Washington 4-0 ATS as a road dog this season. Ron Rivera, he's in that Mike Vrabel, Mike Tomlin conversation when it comes to underdogs. 60-43-2 ATS as an underdog in his career as a head coach. Sam Howell has been, ironically, much better on the road this season. But do you see this as a bounce back spot for Seattle after just getting clobbered last week by Baltimore?
It's a very tough game to handicap. The biggest advantage in this game is the Seattle passing game against the Washington defense. I mean, realistically, you trade away your best 2 edge rushers, and all of a sudden, you're not getting outside pressure at all. You got just guys out there. And if Geno Smith is kept clean, he's surgical. And the corners, they are not in the league of the trio of receivers the Seahawks have. I don't know how well the Seahawks run here. The Commanders still have the interior line, Daron Payne, Jonathan Allen. They're going to be hard to run on, but they might not need to run a lot here. It may be a game where they throw more, and I think it's a massive advantage. Again, Chase Young, Montez Sweat are long gone. And so that's where Seattle's advantage is. It's just Geno can be inconsistent. But I think against this defense, there's going to be open windows so they can score some points.
You're right about that. I don't know if we could justify using this one, man. Commanders on the road is so difficult, but that is an underdog spot that I do kind of like. Maybe it's not quite Circa contest like, but might have to throw some change on that separately. Last thing I will say is I really like the Bengals at home against Houston. We just need to find out what's going on with Chase and Higgins first. If those guys are in, if both are in, I think we're locking the Bengals at 6.5. If one or both are out, then we're backing away. I still think Cincinnati has a good chance to win that game straight up. But winning by a touchdown becomes a little bit dicier. For what it's worth, Jamar Chase was at practice today. We do not have a full report as to what his level of participation was, but that does seem to be somewhat of a good sign. T. Higgins, no update on him quite yet, dealing with that hamstring. And that one kind of came as a surprise, right? Because I don't recall T. Higgins getting injured on Sunday, and then he pops up on the injury report on Tuesday night.
Yeah, we talked about that the prior night on our XM show, but I saw today he actually injured it during practice. So it could have been a tweak, and he sat out today on Thursday. So he sat, missed part of Wednesday, missed Thursday. So now it's like very problematic. And we don't know if it's just maintenance or just to keep it from getting worse. So it's going to be a Friday thing. We're going to have to see what it is. But it's possible also, we've seen him T. Higgins on multiple occasions play a game and be a decoy and not be used at all. So there's a lot of consternation with how this is going to shake out. And with Chase, again, his early comments were very cryptic. His comments make it sound like he isn't playing. I'm very concerned. Joe Mixon should be able to run wild here. That's a good thing. So there's that.
Yeah, it's tough, man. We got to wait and see. That's why we don't lock these in until Friday or Saturday. We need a little more time, and especially a week like this where I'm sure as hell not using Panthers-Bears in the Circa contest. So we got a little bit of time to let this thing breathe. All right, that'll do it for us. We want to thank our sponsor, Circa Sports, of course. Go check out Circa Casino out in Las Vegas. That is our favorite spot in Vegas. Not even close at this point. It is football season at Circa Resort and Casino. They got the best pool in history. It's called Stadium Swim. We're talking 3 levels, 6 pools, 143-foot diagonal screen. It's America's favorite place to watch football. They play every game from college to the pros, all sports, all year round. You can catch all the action poolside. They got a variety of seating options. They got day beds, temperature-controlled cabanas with their own private TVs in there. Stadium Swim. It's located at Circa Resort and Casino, and it is open 365 days a year. As you know, Jim, that is rare. Most pools are shutting down. Most pools aren't even open right now. They're opening back up in March or April. Not Circa. They're open year-round, all sports, all seasons. You can book today at circalasvegas.com. That is circalasvegas.com. Jim, appreciate you joining me, man. Best of luck this weekend.
Good luck to everyone.